greater treasures than a little food or rest. I required kindness and sympathy, but I did not believe myself utterly unworthy of it. The winter advanced, and an entire revolution of the seasons had taken place since I awoke into life. My attention at this time was solely directed towards my plan of introducing myself into the cottage of my protectors. I revolved many projects, but that on which I finally fixed was to enter the dwelling when the blind old man should be alone. I had sagacity enough to discover that the unnatural hideousness of my person was the chief object of horror with those who had formerly beheld me. My voice, although harsh, had nothing terrible in it. I thought, therefore, that if in the absence of his children I could gain the goodwill and mediation of the old de Lacy, I might, by his means, be tolerated by my younger protectors. And that word protectors, that's how he thinks of them, even though they haven't met him. But he is not only hoping and wishing for, love, support, kindness, etc., but he actively thinks of them in the presumption that they are his protectors. One day, when the sun shone on the red leaves that strewed the ground and diffused cheerfulness, although it denied warmth, Safie, Agatha, and Felix departed on a long country walk, and the old man, at his own desire, was left alone in the cottage. When his children had departed, he took up his guitar and played several mournful but sweet airs, more sweet and mournful than I had ever heard him play before. At first his countenance was illuminated with pleasure, but as he continued, thoughtfulness and sadness succeeded at length. Laying down the instrument, he sat absorbed in reflection. My heart beat quick. This was the hour and the moment of trial which would decide my hopes or realize my fears. The servants were gone to a neighboring fair. All was silent in and around the cottage. It was an excellent opportunity, yet when I proceeded to execute my plan, my limbs failed me, and I sank to the ground. Again I rose, and exerting all the firmness of which I was master, removed the planks which I had placed before my hovel to conceal my retreat. The fresh air revived me, and with renewed determination I approached the door of their cottage. I knocked. "Who is there?" said the old man. "Come in." I entered. "Pardon this intrusion," said I. "I am a traveler in want of a little rest, and you would greatly oblige me if you would allow me to remain a few minutes before the fire." "Enter," said de Lacy, "and I will try in what manner I can relieve your wants, but unfortunately my children are from home, and as I am blind, I'm afraid I shall find it difficult to procure food for you." "Do not trouble yourself, my kind host. I have food. It is warmth and rest only that I need." I sat down, and a silence ensued. I knew that every minute was precious to me, yet I remained irresolute in what manner to commence the interview, when the old man addressed me. "By your language, stranger, I suppose you are my countrymen. Are you French?" "No, but I was educated by a French family and understand that language only. I am now going to claim the protection of some friends whom I sincerely love and of whose favor I have some hopes." "Are they Germans?" "No, they are French. But let us change the subject. I am an unfortunate and deserted creature. I look around and I have no relation or friend upon earth. These amiable people to whom I go have never seen me and know little of me. I am full of fears, for if I fail there, I am an outcast in the world forever." "Do not despair. To be friendless is indeed to be unfortunate, but the hearts of men, when unprejudiced by any obvious self-interest, are full of brotherly love and charity. Rely therefore on your hopes, and if these friends are good and amiable, do not despair." So this is, before I move on, the deep sigh is because it is unfair, to demand upon total strangers that they have to love you, right? But on the other hand, it's not unfair, and it's totally naturally human that you have the expectation that you are worthy to be loved, that you are worthy of friendship, that you are worthy of other people comforting you. All right, so let's see how the creature responds. They are kind. They are the most excellent creatures in the world, but unfortunately they are prejudiced against me. I have good dispositions. My life has been hitherto harmless and in some degree beneficial, but a fatal prejudice clouds their eyes, and where they ought to see a feeling and kind friend, they behold only a detestable monster. That is indeed unfortunate, but if you are really blameless, cannot you undeceive them? I'm about to undertake that task, but it is on that account that I have so many overwhelming terrors. I tenderly love these friends. I have, unknown to them, been for many months in the habits of daily kindness towards them. But they believe that I wish to injure them, and it is that prejudice which I wish to overcome. Where do these friends reside? Near this spot? The old man paused and then continued. If you will unreservedly confide to me the particulars of your tale, I perhaps may be of some use in undeceiving them. I am blind and cannot judge of your countenance, but there is something in your words which persuades me that you are sincere. I am poor and in exile, but it will afford me true pleasure to be in any way serviceable to a human creature. Excellent man, I thank you and accept your generous offer. You raise me from the dust by this kindness, and I trust that by your aid I shall not be driven from the society and sympathy of your fellow creatures. The old man. Heaven forbid, even if you were really criminal, for that can only drive you to desperation and not instigate you to virtue. I also am unfortunate. I and my family have been condemned, although innocent. Judge, therefore, if I do not feel for your misfortunes. How can I thank you, my best and only benefactor? From your lips have I heard the voice of kindness. From your lips first have I heard the voice of kindness directed toward me. I shall be forever grateful, and your present humanity assures me of success with those friends whom I am on the point of meeting. The old man. May I know the names and residence of these friends? I paused. This, I thought, was the moment of decision, which was to rob me of or bestow happiness on me forever. I struggled vainly for firmness sufficient to answer him, but the effort destroyed all my remaining strength. I sank on the chair and sobbed aloud. At that moment I heard the steps of my younger protectors. I had not a moment to lose, but seizing the hand of the old man, I cried, "Now is the time. Save and protect me. You and your family are the friends whom I seek. Do not desert me in the hour of trial." "Great God!" exclaimed the old man. "Who are you?" At that instant, the cottage door was opened, and Felix, Safi, and Agatha entered. Who can describe their horror and consternation on beholding me? Agatha fainted. Safi, unable to attend to her friend, rushed out of the cottage. Felix darted forward and with supernatural force tore me from his father, to whose knees I clung in a transport of fury. He dashed me to the ground and struck me violently with a stick. I could have torn him limb from limb as the lion rends the antelope. But my heart sunk within me as with bitter sickness, and I refrained. I saw him on the point of repeating his blow, when overcome by pain and anguish, I quitted the cottage, and in the general tumult escaped unperceived to my hovel. So this is tragic. I mean, that's the word for it. This is just absolutely tragic. The monster is obsessing and strategizing on how best to approach this family, and what he chooses seems like the best choice, right? If the old man is blind, then he can't be repelled by the sight of the monster. But he also inadvertently creates this tableau, right? He never speaks to Felix, Agatha, and Safi. All they see when they walk in is the monster, physically encroaching on their old blind father. So the monster sort of inadvertently creates this tableau in which, arguably Felix and Agatha are totally, reacting defensively, to protect their father. Chapter 16. Cursed Creator, why did I live? Why in that instant did I not extinguish the spark of existence which you had so wantonly bestowed? I know not. Despair had not yet taken possession of me. My feelings were those of rage and revenge. I could with pleasure have destroyed the cottage and its inhabitants and have glutted myself with their shrieks and misery. What he's describing here is restraint. He has the physical power to inflict violence and harm on this family and his hurt and his rage, but he restrains himself. He exercises self-control, which is something that Victor Frankenstein has exercised very little of. When night came, I quitted my retreat and wandered in the wood, and now no longer restrained, there's that word, by the fear of discovery, I gave vent to my anguish in fearful howlings. I was like a wild beast that had broken the toils, destroying the objects that obstructed me, and ranging through the woods with a stag-like swiftness. Oh, what a miserable night I passed. The coal stars shone in mockery, and the bare trees waved their branches above me. Now and then the sweet voice of a bird burst forth amidst the universal stillness. All save I were at rest or in enjoyment. I, like the arch-fiend, bore a hell within me, and finding myself unsympathized with, wished to tear up the trees, spread havoc and destruction around me, and then to have sat down and enjoyed the ruin. This has shades of Milton here, my friends. But this was a luxury of sensation that could not endure. I became fatigued with excess of bodily exertion and sank on the damp grass in the sick impotence of despair. There was none among the myriads of men that existed who would pity or assist me. And should I feel kindness towards my enemies? No. From that moment, I declared everlasting war against the species, and more than all against him who had formed me and sent me forth to this insupportable misery. So right there, that's it. That's the origin story. How did the monster become the monster? Right there, right? He has the dark night of the soul. He experiences this intense rejection, and then he comes out of it vowing revenge and enmity against humans. And there, by the way, is the prototype for every single origin story of a superhero movie that we've seen in like the last 10, 15 years. The sun rose. I heard the voices of men and knew that it was impossible to return to my retreat during the day. Accordingly, I hid myself in some thick underwood, determining to devote the ensuing hours to reflection upon my situation. The pleasant sunshine, the pure air of day, restored me to some degree of tranquility, and when I considered what had passed at the cottage, I could not help believing that I had been too hasty in my conclusions. I'd certainly acted imprudently. It was apparent that my conversation had interested the father in my behalf, and I was a fool in having exposed my person to the horror of his children. I ought to have familiarized the old De Lacy to me, and by degrees to have discovered myself to the rest of the family, when they should have been prepared for my approach. But I did not believe my errors to be irretrievable, and after much consideration, I resolved to return to the cottage, seek the old man, and by my representations win him to my party. These thoughts calmed me, and in the afternoon I sank into a profound sleep, but the fever of my blood did not allow me to be visited by peaceful dreams. The horrible scene of the preceding day was forever acting before my eyes. The females were flying, the enraged Felix tearing me from his father's feet. I awoke exhausted, and finding that it was already night, I crept forth from my hiding place and went in search of food. When my hunger was appeased, I directed my steps toward the well-known path that conducted to the cottage. All there was at peace. I crept into my hovel and remained in silent expectation of the accustomed hour when the family arose. That hour passed. The sun mounted high in the heavens, but the cottagers did not appear. I trembled violently, apprehending some dreadful misfortune. The inside of the cottage was dark, and I heard no motion. I cannot describe the agony of this suspense. Presently, 2 countrymen passed by, but pausing near the cottage, they entered into conversation using violent gesticulations, and I did not understand what they said, as they spoke the language of the country, which differed from that of my protectors. Soon after, however, Felix approached with another man. I was surprised, as I knew that he had not quitted the cottage that morning, and waited anxiously to discover from his discourse the meaning of these unusual appearances. "Do you consider," said his companion to him, "that you will be obliged to pay 3 months' rent and to lose the produce of your garden? I do not wish to take any unfair advantage, and I beg, therefore, that you will take some days to consider of your determination." "It is utterly useless," replied Felix. "We can never again inhabit your cottage. The life of my father is in the greatest danger, owing to the dreadful circumstance that I have related. My wife and my sister will never recover from their horror. I entreat you not to reason with me any more. Take possession of your tenement and let me fly from this place." Felix trembled violently as he said this. He and his companion entered the cottage, in which they remained for a few minutes, and then departed. I never saw any of the family of De Lacy more. So when the creature has the dark night of the soul, he reconsiders and comes up with a better strategy, but there is no redemption here. There is no ever reconciling with this family. I continued for the remainder of the day in my hovel in a state of utter and stupid despair. My protectors had departed and had broken the only link that held me to the world. For the first time, the feelings of revenge and hatred filled my bosom, and I did not strive to control them. But allowing myself to be borne away by the stream, I bent my mind towards injury and death. When I thought of my friends, of the mild voice of De Lacy, the gentle eyes of Agatha, and the exquisite beauty of the Arabian, these thoughts vanished, and a gush of tears somewhat soothed me. But again, when I reflected that they had spurned and deserted me, anger returned, a rage of anger, and unable to injure anything human, I turned my fury towards inanimate objects. As night advanced, I placed a variety of combustibles around the cottage, and after having destroyed every vestige of cultivation in the garden, I waited with forced impatience until the moon had sunk to commence my operations. So, the creature. Okay. I'm gonna speak here from my experience as a teacher. Intellect is one thing, emotions are another thing, right? And the creature here is 1 year old. I mean, he's been on the earth 1 year. And in that year, we've seen the leaps and bounds of his intellectual education, step by step, as he has learned, life, death, senses. He's learned language. He's learned how to read. He's read these great works of literature. But he's a toddler emotionally, right? He's at the very, very, very beginning of his emotional education, and so he lashes out like a toddler, right? He has these intense desires that are the intense desires of a child. He wants to be loved by a parent, and he feels rejection there. He wants to be loved, period. He feels empathy, and he wants some empathy in return. And in the face of that rejection, he lashes out. So this is a creature who has the intellect of an adult, but the emotions of a very small child. And actually, I think that is a good stopping point for us for this episode. So, as per usual, send me any questions, comments. If you're liking the episodes, give it a little subscribe, give it a little like on whatever service you're using to hear the podcast. And Lady Splaining out.